And we're back. Welcome to Abstractable. My name's Lockie and this is Ryan. And this is a podcast that's for people who are curious about the world around them and want to learn new things. Today we do something a little bit different and we talk about a film that we've watched, which has got a really cool title as well, called Jiro Dreams of Sushi. And it's directed by David Gelb.
In the episode, we talk about Jiro's almost 90-year career, 70 of which he's made nothing but sushi. When the simple can become art, and we talk about what it's like to follow in your father's footsteps, or should we say the footsteps of a myth or a god.
He is a living legend, this guy.
So you can find out more about the filmmaker on Twitter at This Is David Gelb, or watch his other series, which a sequel to this particular documentary, which is Chef's Table on Netflix. So we hope you enjoy the episode. It's a great documentary.
So what are we drinking here? It's a start. You don't like it?
No, it was so good because you said, so what are we drinking here? You're like... It's good.
Tastes good. Where'd you get this?
Four Sigmatic.
What's that?
Mushroom coffee.
Mushroom coffee.
Which I'm sure many people have heard about now. It's been spruiked again and again and again. Or at least,
is this a Joe Rogan thing?
At least in the world of things that I listen to. No, I think it was a Tim Ferriss thing.
I see.
Very much a Tim Ferriss thing.
Makes more sense.
Those
is it supposed to give me energy?
I think the idea is that you have half a dose of caffeine and then you have this mix of chaga and lion's mane mushroom, each doing different things. Nothing that's going to give you the visuals, mate, so don't be too concerned.
Nothing. I can drive home.
You can drive home after this.
Good.
And I think the idea is that it sustains cognitive function. They're nootropics.
Right.
So they interact with the brain somehow to make us more alert and more cognitively engaged than we otherwise would be.
Well, I hope it helps us today.
Although I feel like I was more cognitively engaged after the gym session this morning. Tell you what, exercise.
Do it. So what are we talking about today, right?
We're doing something different.
I can't say book because it's not a book.
Yeah. Mind you, we have done a podcast. So this is not a podcast, not a book. It's a documentary.
Yes. And
a documentary that used to be on Australian Netflix, but is no longer there.
It was hard to dig it up, wasn't it? It's called Jiro Dreams of Sushi for everyone out there. And you can get it on Netflix if you find a way to access American Netflix, if you're that way inclined. Not saying that I did that, but you might have. No, there's ways to get a hold of that if you want to. I'll leave it at that.
I was going to say you can keep digging, keep going.
Allegedly. Is that the right thing to say? And I think you can also potentially buy it through Amazon Prime, but
yeah, I couldn't find it anywhere on the Apple.
It's actually tough to find it.
Yeah, but there is a director's commentary on YouTube, the full thing, which is basically the film with director's commentary over the top.
Yeah, but it doesn't have subtitles, so you're missing a lot of the meat there. I'd probably recommend trying to find it first, but if that's the last resort, then you can go to that and you can watch it for free there.
So, one sentence, what's this documentary about, Lockie?
This documentary is about a man named Jiro, who is a Japanese sushi chef, and he runs a 10-person restaurant in a train station in Japan. And he is an absolute master. So it's about mastery.
We were at one sentence and then it became two.
No, it's a comma.
Semicolon. So Jiro was a documentary done by David Gelb, and I'm sure there's quite a few people who have probably heard of him for his famous series known as Chef's Table. And this was almost a prequel to Chef's Table.
I've never seen that. What is it about? It's like a version of this, is it?
It's basically what you see on Jiro Dreams of Sushi for lots of other restaurants, namely 3 Michelin stars. But then he's gone on to do slightly different tweaks on it. So there's a pastry entire season just
he loves food.
Pastry. Loves food. I thoroughly enjoyed the first season.
Okay.
Into the second season, I just became a little bit out of touch with the template.
Right.
But I think the template's amazing. But I just got a little bit desensitized to it.
Is it as insightful as watching the film?
It is. Yeah. Oh, yes.
Like, is the subject matter? Because this film was bloody awesome.
Yeah, we've got. There's one on Massimo Bottura, which is Osteria Francescana. There's one on one of my favorites is Francis Melman. He's a guy from Argentina. And then there's also one of our very own Ben Shuri, who runs Attica.
Right. Just
not too far away from where we are at the moment.
Cool.
So he covers off a lot of great chefs around the world doing amazing things. But it basically does a similar thing to what Jiro does, but for these guys. Yeah. Maybe not to the same depth. Who knows? Because this film was originally getting started in the early 2000s and was originally intended to be something of a documentary just around sushi and the methods of sushi and how to make sushi. Japan, I'm not sure if they're going to go outside of Japan as well, but it was with David Gelb, as I said, and Mashiro Yamamoto. And
good effort. That was good. It sounded good.
And they wanted to start this kind of documentary off going to this restaurant, checking it out, doing some initial research, and basically were so starstruck after they had a meal that they said, no one has eaten more, this Mashiro no one has eaten more sushi than me. And they were so blown away that they decided to make the entire documentary just about Jiro.
Awesome.
Which is awesome. So Jiro Ono, there's very little known about his personal life, but he is 92 years of age at the moment. Although I actually think he's older than that. I think he was born in 1925, which makes him 94. So he's renowned sushi craftsman, and that is all that you get when you go to his restaurant. They make a point of this. There's no appetizers. There's no food, no drinks.
They serve sushi.
Sushi, and that's all you get.
They give you water?
I
don't know.
I think you can probably get water.
Probably.
I wonder about sake. I wonder if you can get that as well. So
and only 10 seats.
10 seats.
In a train station.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's from very humble beginnings, but he's now a 3 Michelin star, internationally renowned Japanese sushi restaurant that has come from very grassroots level. So Jiro was kicked out of home at the ripe old age of 9. He did start working in a restaurant a couple of years before that, which puts him at just a measly 7 decades or so.
Closing on 8.
Well, professional working career, and then an additional 1.5 on top of that for when he was originally kicked out of home. So
pretty rough upbringing. His parents, I think his dad says in the film, was an alcoholic and had other issues and sleeping under bridges and this sort of stuff.
Well, he would when he was booted out of home and he was told to go on his own way, he would find refuge in temples or under bridges for his shelter, as well as working during the day, getting kicked by chefs and different things, his bosses, to hurry up or to do things better. And so he's very much comes from that traumatized, but been able to pull himself out of it. Yeah, certainly it's a mark of his success. So he is very much he's kind of very much fits into that Japanese culture. Everything that he does is very organized, very orderly. There's a very strict process about what he does.
And he did an apprenticeship when he was younger to become a sushi chef. I think you got here that he was 26 years old when he began that.
Yeah. So that's when he officially began his sushi training.
Yes.
And then it wasn't.
Which is an involved process that they say in the film takes upwards of 10 years.
Correct.
To complete that apprenticeship.
Or more. I think there's just 10 years of doing very reduced quantity of activities in the kitchen. I think it's making rice and maybe a couple of other things, and then you get the opportunity to progress beyond that shortly after. So then
I think they said it takes you 10 years till you can make the eggs.
Yeah.
The egg sushi. So.
Yes. What have you done in 10 years?
I've never made egg sushi, but
Not there yet.
That is unfathomable to us. But we'll get into that sort of later on, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, so then it wasn't until 40 that he opened up his restaurant. Some people, it used to be the 40-year-old crisis kind of thing that would happen in people's lives. It's probably more 50.
Midlife crisis.
Yeah, the midlife crisis is really at 50 now, which is a much nicer age. Yeah, it's very
have a crisis. And now there's the quarter life crisis too.
Yeah.
So we're having crises everywhere.
Crises everywhere. There's no menus at the restaurant, and meals per person minimum kind of $300 upwards, and that's $300 US.
And you can't, like at the time of filming, the wait list was months, and now it doesn't even take bookings from the public.
Correct. Yeah. So this has been a bold move, maybe, and so they've lost their 3 Michelin stars at the end of last year, which is kind of unthinkable for this restaurant. Certainly, when you see the documentary, but the reason that they have lost them is nothing to do with the quality of food, and I think actually Michelin has spoken of that. It's more that Michelin is supposed to be open to the public, although that's also arguable. I know when we went to Italy, we tried to get into Osteria Francescana, and it felt like it was impossible to get even just a sitting for a lunchtime session booked 3 months in advance, which is the minimum the maximum amount of time that they open up for bookings.
Yeah.
So it's very much, I think it sounds like you must know someone to get in, or you must be of special honorary mention to get in there.
So he didn't open his restaurant till what? He was 65. He was 40 years old in 1965.
Correct.
Wow. There you go.
Yeah. And so, but then you frame that, he's been in it now for,
40,
that again.
50 years.
Yeah, more.
It's a long career.
It's a very long career. So
there's not even a toilet in the restaurant either, by the way. You have to go out into the subway. It's strange, isn't it?
It's very focused.
Yeah.
It's very focused. So he has 2 sons, Yoshikazu Ono and Takashi Ono, and they are both sushi chefs, although they were, and we'll get into this, but they were kind of pressured into
taking on the family business.
Yeah, taking on the family business.
Which is implied in the film. That's quite Japanese.
Yes. The eldest brother still works at the restaurant under Jiro, and he is still I guess you call him the sous chef under the head chef at that restaurant. And it's
traditional for the first son to take over the business of the father.
Correct.
So the second son went out on his own and started a new restaurant.
Correct. That would have been an interesting conversation.
Yes. Well, interesting family.
And so the restaurant has seen the likes of Shinzo Abe, which is the PM of Japan. I'm pretty sure he's still the PM of Japan. And, former US President Barack Obama dined there. I know Tom Cruise did a seating there, and so did our own Hugh Jackman.
Yeah. Love it.
So it's seen a star-trodden clientele go through.
So I guess we picked this movie to talk about because it's a super interesting look at mastery, or someone who's just honed their craft to the point of complete, I suppose, expertise, or to the pinnacle.
I noticed you were hesitant to say perfection.
Yes, because that's right. That's probably the word that came to me, but I didn't want to because of what they talk about in the movie.
Yeah, there is a quote that he pulls out that he doesn't believe that he's actually reached perfection. So we don't care about money. All I want to do is make better sushi. I will keep climbing until I reach the top. No one knows where the top is. I don't think I've achieved perfection. I feel ecstatic every day. I love making sushi. I fell in love with my work and gave my life to it. In order to make delicious food, you need to eat delicious food.
It's a very amazing story. So the film takes you through basically through his processes, the dynamic with his sons, what they do, and about how they kind of care so much about their food. So it's going to be interesting to talk about how this compares to what we talked about in one of our other episodes, Range, about the generalist, whereas this man is very much a specialist.
Yeah, he is. He's lived and breathed it his entire life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
what's what I was going to say? What is one of his big driving, focuses? Which was something that we did also touch on in the episode of Range.
His driving focus is to improve a little bit every day, and so I think the traits that he has and the people that work with him have is just continuous improvement. Horrible word, well overused. But it's that he looks at every single thing that he's doing and tries to improve a tiny bit on it. And that culminates in just compounding the quality of what he's able to produce. And so everything from the way the restaurant's set up, where he places the sushi on the plate for the person, depending if they're right-handed, left-handed. He makes it smaller for females and larger for males, depending on their size. So it's more,
Well, there's 20 courses.
Yeah. And each course is one sushi. Is that the right terminology? One sushi roll? It's not a roll. It's one piece of sushi. And he doesn't ever feel like he's achieved perfection. He's continuously trying to get better and better, and he's got a genuine love for it. And the reward is the craft itself, the love of improvement. So the challenge of coming to work every day and doing that, and the constant repetition, is that he does the same thing over and over again and keeps getting better at it.
He's a very orderly man, very much like of his routine.
And he's very cleanliness and organisation. Yeah. I'd add to organisation.
So he wakes up, or at least when he was bringing up the kids at home, he would wake up at 5. I use that word lightly.
He's a workaholic.
Yeah.
Like, he's just to the point. There are things that you can admire about this guy and things that you won't like about him. At least that's what I thought. And I definitely don't want to be him, but it is interesting to look at what he's done.
Well, it's interesting that he says that but he is ecstatic with every single day. So, and I guess at the end of the day, that could be one of the main things. So he gets up every day at 5 a.m, heads to work at 5 a.m. every single day. He'll stand in the exact same spot at the train station, grab the same spot on the train every day. Thankfully for him, the trains run at the exact same time every day because it's in Japan.
You wouldn't have that here. He'd be crammed in. He gets crammed into the same spot on the train every day. When it turns up 20 minutes late and the second service is cancelled, then he has to take the bus replacement across town.
Sounds like you're frustrated with public transport.
You know, not the best here in Melbourne.
Yeah. Improving. Continuous improvement.
Yeah.
And so he goes about that very much, similar routine. He'll work the big day and then won't arrive home until 10 o'clock at night every single day. He hates holidays. He just wants to be at work. The only time he will take a holiday is if it's a national holiday, and that's more due to respect or
someone died. He'll go to the funeral and go to work at night.
Yep.
It sums him up with this quote from the movie. The only difference between Jiro now and Jiro 40 years ago is that he stopped smoking.
And he improved every day.
And he improved his sushi baking.
So would you want to be one of his apprentices, Lockie?
No, I wouldn't.
Why not?
He's just brutal on him. And it's just, there's so much deference to the order of, and I guess this comes back to our discussion around the positives and negatives of his approach that we'll inevitably get into, but you have to basically pay a penance that's too big, I think, to be, it's basically about suffering for a certain amount of time until you can be worthy, which I don't agree with as a concept.
Is that not what learning is?
It is, but only if you're doing it for, I feel like there's more in the intention of it than just, like, it's got some positive benefits such as you will achieve mastery if you work with this guy for 15 years, but the crap you're going to have to take in the interim and the hit to your happiness and your self-worth, I think, would be quite intense because it's kind of that Japanese culture, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think you could translate that and put it here.
No. And there's no doubt there's benefits, but I'm talking from a personal perspective. It's not something I'd want. But I would love to be as good at something as he is. And you can take the bits of this that you like and apply it to your own life.
I think as we spoke about in our range, they debunked the 10,000 hour rule as being, it was essentially something that was coined by, I'm going to get it wrong, I'm not even going to have a go.
Some guy.
Yeah. It was coined by an economist, I think, many years ago. Might have been Steven Pinker, but might have been someone else. And so that term having been coined is now associated with you must achieve 10,000 hours in order to achieve mastery. Well, thankfully that has now been debunked by the science. It doesn't mean that the hard work isn't required and that, putting in more time isn't going to result in being better, but it doesn't necessarily result in you being better. So I expect that being an apprentice at his restaurant, that you're not just putting in the time. There would be a strict course of discipline and, they try the food all the time and they're very critical of how things tasted. I found it very strange, actually. There was one section where I think the son, who still works at the flagship restaurant, was tasting the next apprentices down, he's the next chef down now. I think he's graduated from apprenticeship at long last, and he was tasting his one of his sushis. He said, "There's too much wasabi in this. Too spicy." And he goes on to say, "But it's very good." You know, and I imagine that bit of sushi would have tasted unlike any sushi I've ever tried in my life. Maybe.
The thing is, my palate is so not
sensitive.
It's not right for sushi or that type of food that I'd go in there and probably not like it.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, I think that there's a lot of great things that he does, and that, you know, to learn specific skills, his approach is excellent, I think.
He's been able to replicate it. You know, his two sons, exceptional.
He's a good teacher, there's no doubt, but he's a hard teacher. And I think he's really stubborn in terms of the standards he keeps, but he keeps a very open and creative mind about trying new things. And that's how he innovates on this. He's made a lot of innovations in sushi, and he's
in a game which supposedly could never be innovated. You know, we've done everything. We've tried everything.
Which is rubbish too. Whoever thought that.
Whenever you hear that, alarm bells.
Yeah. And it's sort of, I summarised it in my notes as he's stubborn looking down, so looking behind him at what he's already discovered. He's very rigid to those standards that he knows works, but then he's very open when he's looking out and looking up, and he wants to try new things and experiment and tinker every day with what he does. And then when he finds something that makes his sushi a little bit better, it gets locked in the basket and goes behind him, and you keep that standard up to that level until you find a new thing, and then you add it on. And that approach to learning skills and that sort of artisan learning, that works. It works bloody well too. But getting those new ideas, that's where you can use the generalist to kind of steal from other domains, etc. I think that's kind of how it's breaking down in my brain a little bit.
Yeah. I see that as though he's like building up this layering of different things that is going on, and he must sit on like a little, because he's right at the nuance at the moment. You know, it's like, I don't even know what he would be tweaking in some of the stuff that he's doing now. You know, it's to that degree, but you know, he might be slightly tilting his hand one way when he's going to wipe on the sauce, you know, just before he serves it up, and instead of holding his hand at this angle, it's held at a slightly steeper angle or something.
And it gives like, so he's yeah, well, that's a good point. He's super reflective, isn't he?
Yes.
He iterates, if in for want of a mathematical term.
But I suspect once he's found that angle, he'll go, okay, I'm happy with that.
Lock that in.
Next layer.
Next.
What are we trying next?
Yeah. And do that for 80 years, that compounds.
I'm sure it does. Sounds like a principle.
Oh, I like that. And the illusion that gives is that when he's doing it, that it's easy. That's what masterful people do. It's like you see Roger Federer play tennis, it looks simple, you know. I could do that, but you can't because it's all the tiny things and the preparation in the background that make it, I think.
Yeah, but even just in you know, hitting that ball back, you can kind of visualize yourself in that position, but when it comes to actually doing it, you're like, oh shit, the ball went out of the court, or the ball hit the net, or whatever it is. Yeah, there's something about the actual execution in the way they do it, because it does, in the movie, it looks very simple, most of it. There's a couple of things that look, you know, they're quite fast and doing things in a fancy way, but most of it looks very simple, but there's such a refined process to it.
Yeah, agreed.
Masters of their game. And
I think they said he's probably made 2 million pieces of sushi. You know, that's a lot of sushi.
That's a big number.
That's a lot of sushi if you think about 2 million times doing something. And it's interesting how the apprentices, they learn to a certain point and then end up leaving and starting their own shops, but it actually reflects well on the original place where they learned. So
this is an interesting concept, Lockie.
Yeah, so they essentially, by teaching and growing their influence through these other chefs, it actually makes their restaurant more prestigious because it's like a master factory, you know.
there's this idea around, the modern take on an apprenticeship, which is the apprenticeship in maybe areas that aren't traditionally held as being apprenticeships, but quite often what it means is that apprentice will go out into the world and start their own. And there's a lot of people that talk about, they encourage people to at some point that they want to go out,
Yeah, I think that's something I need to aspire to later on in my career, is to develop that in people so they leave your business better than when they came, and that's good enough, It's being very secure in yourself to do that. I think it's an honourable thing.
Yeah, it's like, I will show you the way. You will work to, learn the way, work hard to learn the way. But I want you to send you off better than you ever would have been otherwise.
Yeah,
and
it's telling you all the secrets.
Yeah, and if you want to almost leave, or go do your own thing and start your own, almost like business, family, whatever you want to call it. Some people refer to it as their business family, and so be it. And I will be happy, and you'll be happy.
Yeah,
want what's best.
It's something I reflect on myself is that I would love to be more disciplined, in the things I know are right. I know the things I know that work, that are in my backpacks, like Jiro. He's fanatical about keeping that standard. But he's also very intentional about how he identifies and captures that information, whereas I'm walking around, I wouldn't be able to explain to you now what my approach is for certain things, and I need to do that. I need to identify what's my approach for communication, what's my approach for time management, what's my approach for this or that, and I could probably explain my time management approach to you. But if I can fully know where I'm at, then I can iterate on it and become more disciplined. I think I've gotten more disciplined since I started working, but I could grow a lot in that area and it would help me significantly, I think.
Yeah, there's certainly something to that layering and the iterations up as they go.
What do you reckon about the suppliers too? That was an interesting.
Yeah, well, it doesn't just stop at the restaurant. It's everything. I guess the only thing downstream of the restaurant is the client, is the customer.
Which he's now controlled that too.
Yeah. There's only a select few that can go there, the ones that are really going to appreciate it. It's almost like a club. I've also got a theory. I wonder if that is something to do with him stepping down from the restaurant at some point in time. Prediction. Maybe this is an opportunity to kind of reset the board.
Perhaps.
Without any shame, because shame's a massive thing, over in Japan, the pride and shame associated with your work. And maybe this is an opportunity to start from scratch, because in the next few years, I expect, although they've been saying this since Jiro was 70 when he had a heart attack, that, it's a quarter of a century ago, saying that he will step down soon and let his oldest son, who's now also become, he's basically a senior in terms of his age, take over. And so there's an opportunity to start from scratch almost.
Interesting. Relaunch.
That was just a little thing that clicked, maybe.
Yeah. Good conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
But he effectively goes to the market for fish, which is his main supplier, fish and rice.
Yes. And they go to suppliers who only deal in, they're not selling all seafood. These are guys that only sell tuna, or only sell shrimps.
Specialists themselves.
Yeah, they are specialists in what their food is, and they give quite a bit of insight into the tuna dealer and how he goes about it. He describes himself as like this anti-establishment type guy, and that was a little strange.
I guess it's a big deal over there.
It is a big deal. It is a big deal.
It's just a bit foreign to us.
It is. And so the reason he called himself that is because he won't just buy any sushi. In fact, he won't just buy the best sushi, the best tunas. He will only buy the first pick tuna. And if he doesn't get his first pick tuna, he won't buy. So he won't, which means he won't be supplying that particular day.
So I haven't quite figured out in my head what that means and what I can take from that.
Well, it's because this is where I see it. I see that as this is something that comes as a result of the product that he's providing for his clients. And Jiro actually says that, you know, we don't, or it might have been his son, you know, we are experts in sushi, but we are not experts when it comes to fish. Although I'd still say they're probably experts, you know, compared to us when it comes to fish. And we trust our suppliers. And I think that's big.
Yeah. So they want perfectionists like them, so it cascades down.
Correct. But they also don't want to have to think about it. It
reminded me of something in the Naval podcast where he says in the extras that he says that you want a lawyer from someone who's like a 1 or 2 person law shop, because you know you're getting
the owner,
super accountable, owner, which is a good transition actually into what I wanted to talk about next, around the environment that he creates for himself and how that impacts how good his sushi is, I think. So something that struck me was that, first of all, he's only got a tiny amount of customers. So he's kept it really small, and he'll only make a small amount of sushi every day.
1,000 true fans, Kevin Kelly.
Yeah. So he's restricted his supply down a lot. So his price per sushi is very high, you know. The second thing is that he serves a really small menu. So only, 10 to 20 pieces, I think, per sitting. And this reminded me of when Steve Jobs came in and cut all the products they were making at Apple and said, we're making a phone, an iPad, an iPod, and a whatever, and a computer, you know. And what that does, I think, is that it means that you end up making yourself super accountable to the few things that you're putting out. So you've put yourself in a really tough position where you have to nail those things. You're not making 30 scattergun. You're kind of making 20 pieces or 10 pieces of sushi for 10 people. You know, there's not 50 items on the menu.
Well, in particular when Jobs came back in to Apple in the 90s, he basically cut everything but the what was the second Apple, I think, the second computer that they were producing,
the iMac or the one, the bubble shell, the fluoro colors,
whatever it was. So there was very, very few products other than that single product.
So I mean, and then so all that does is that firstly it puts pressure on you to deliver, first of all, and you get super focused on a smaller amount of stuff. And it increases the amount of repetition you're doing on one and iterations you're doing on one thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think that has an effect, and it's an interesting thing to think about for your own life, I think. Well, for mine is that in business, do you pick 3 things? If you're going for a high quality product, you need to be narrow, I think, and back yourself in. And I think it's something good for me to think about.
And it's also a case of, do the simple things well. And there's also something that comes from, you said you're not being a scattergun, so you're focused. You're not just accountable to one product, but you're focused on one product. It's not to say to cancel all of your other products. It's, to try and go, well, what aren't we getting the most value from? And there might be a Pareto thing in this too. What is providing the most value? could be an 80-20 analysis.
It's like your career. Like, what are the 5 traits that you need to nail to get where you want to go? And how are you going with them? And if you can't outsource them or anything, they're core to what you need to deliver, then start getting better at them. You know, that's what I'm taking from this, is that for me, write down the 5 things that you do that you need to get bloody good at, figure out where you're at, and start looking with the tools that range teaches you outside, and keep your eyes up so you can put new things and be very disciplined about the stuff you know to be true. I think that's...
Yeah, it's what they call the doubling down, doubling down on your strengths.
Yeah. Or even weaknesses but you just have to do. You know, there's certain weaknesses. I mean, the doubling down your strength, I think, is good advice, but there are some things that you just have to get better at because you can't get out of them.
Correct.
They're core skills.
Yeah, but there's also things that you aren't good at that you should throw away.
Yes.
Completely.
Yeah.
And so maybe one of the skills that you can't throw away is in business is selling. You can never get away from selling.
So get good at it.
Yeah. And even if you're not the best, you still need, if you're an owner, you need to be a decent salesman.
I'm a believer in that you can get, everything can be learned, firstly. That's something it took me a long time to figure out, but I'm fanatical about that. You can learn anything, but you just end up, everyone starts at a different point from different skills. Some people are naturally good at something, some people are not. And then everyone's got a different level that they can get to for that particular skill. So you might be here, if I'm a communicator and I might be good at communication, I'll start here. If you're not, you'll start a little bit further back. And our maximum will be somewhere different as well. But you can learn pretty much anything to a point that you'll be able to get by. You may not be the fastest runner in the world, but if you practice running, you can get better than most people at running if you practiced it for years.
But you won't be Usain Bolt.
No, but you can see that on the internet's great for that. You can look up people who have painted every day for 10 years who could barely draw a cartoon at the start, A specific skill you can get very good at with consistent practice. Discipline, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't think that contradicts what we were talking about the other day.
No.
I think it pairs with it.
Yes. I think whilst these guys are certainly specialists in their domain, I think they have I also think they have a slightly nuanced position than what maybe what some of what was discussed in Range. So let's take some of the big projects from Range, which were, a space launch. And so you think about the project like a space launch and just how much is going on in one of those projects, billions of dollars invested and so many different departments and things that need to be right and to a particular standard. Whereas
you mean complexity, essentially.
Complexity.
Interesting.
Yeah. Deeply complex. Versus, and it's not to say that sushi isn't complex. And I think what you'll actually find is you're trying to seek out more complexity, to a degree as you're honing your skills in this,
That's interesting.
One of these.
They're kind of different types of complexity. You're talking about complexity in terms of like unknown, a lot of interactions, a lot of things that can happen externally and internally, whereas
and
the complexity of honing in, you have to consider more things, but there's not so much outside complexity from like someone coming into the restaurant and poisoning the rice or something, like it's a fairly closed system.
Yeah. Or the sushi restaurant just all of a sudden blowing up because there wasn't a fuel valve wasn't quite right or something like that.
Yeah.
It's not something that is going to be highly accountable.
Yeah. I think you've hit the nail on the head. That's a really important point, I think.
And so they're also, they're playing in this in a much more limited environment.
And you have things, the extension of that is that you have things that you need to learn that are the same, and we go back to those core skills. They are in relatively, to a point, learnable things. You can practice them.
Yeah. And depending on your craft, there's also that.
Yeah, true.
As well,
true.
Which to couple it with, because quite often the core skills are soft skills.
Yes.
Yeah. In this day and age.
So they need to be flexible, but you can learn base principles to deal with that.
Correct. And so what I saw is, there's obviously the various seafoods. There's a limited number of vegetables and condiments, and then there's the rice. And that's kind of the ingredients that you're dealing with, and there's a few different methods that they go about dealing with them. But I'd say I likened it more to, say, a chess game, and think about how long some of the chess masters of the world, the chess prodigies of the world, they spend their entire lives honing this craft in what is much more of a constrained game.
Yeah.
Versus going out and building that rocket. Yeah. Just the complexity that creeps in. And that's where I think that that's where I think the difference lies between what was getting discussed in range versus what was getting, focused on in this particular thing. So
I agree.
Very, very interesting.
That's a good insight.
Have you got any insight from your own personal life in this, Lockie? In your own work?
Well, I think where I work is more in project management in civil construction, which is a hugely dynamic and complex environment where things change constantly. But I think it's easier to spot repetition when you're dealing with something like making sushi, when you're repeating it one after the other on a short time frame where it's relatively similar. Or like you're in like I often think about manufacturing versus civil construction, and that they're quite similar things. You're building stuff, but they're approached in completely different ways. So much so that I actually think there's a lot to learn from manufacturing, because you can't just holistically take their principles and put them into civil construction because it's too much of a dynamic environment. However,
it's too much information.
Yeah, it does repeat. You still build a road the same way every time you build a road, Yes, there's more complexity. It'll be different, but it's not different enough to not learn something from the last time. And I think that's something that we could definitely improve on as me personally and as an industry, is actually learning from what we've done in the past, reflecting and improving the process every time and honing it in like Jiro does.
Yeah, it's just
much harder because it's more variable each time. But if you do it 1,000 times, you'll probably have one time that's really different, 10 times that are happen in 30 days, 40 times that happen, there'll be groups of similar things happening over and over again.
Yeah. It's almost as if take what is such a seemingly complex thing, as building a road, and breaking it into its simple chunks, and then going, okay, how do we tackle some of the things we can control here, and how, what can we measure and take to the next time?
Yeah. And what happened the last 400 times we did this? Because it's not going to tell you what will happen this time. It can't, because it's a complex, random environment. Anything can happen. But you're better looking at that information than guessing from the ground up, because the empirical data is going to be better than what you can kind of predict yourself. So you can use the past to look at it, reflect, and hone your approach. And I think that would be something in the complex that you can still do. You just can't trust it as much.
Yeah. Or you need to realize that where the box is.
Yeah, our box.
Coming back to the box.
Yes, and question
We're going to do
box.
that.
Yeah, I like that saying. I think we've coined something there.
I can't even remember what it was. Work out where the box is.
It's like, don't think outside the box. Think about the box.
Think about the box.
Yeah.
That's it. Nice.
So
his sons.
This was probably the narrative that was woven through the story of the sons and the father. And that was really interesting in itself.
This actually gave me a little bit of a negative feel about the documentary, to be honest.
Yeah.
And that's probably just something in me.
It was hard to watch. It felt you felt a little bit sad for his sons in some ways.
Mm. Why is that, Lockie?
I think because particularly his eldest son who works under him, you really do wonder whether he actually wanted to take over the family business if he had an independent choice.
I think he actually explicitly states he didn't.
I don't see that he's particularly unhappy. But I wonder if and maybe this is just a Western point of view, but you wonder if he's lived the life he wanted to.
They did say that
it's a tough life.
That Jiro did persuade both of the sons, to come into the sushi business. He did allow, he said that he wanted them to stay in high school or allowed them to stay in high school. I can't recall which it was. Mm. And then they both wanted to go off and do their different things, but he persuaded them both to come into the sushi business to learn the trade, which they both hated for like 2 years.
Mm. You got to wonder, is it just our perspective that this is a bad thing? Or this is I think it's... Is there anything wrong with taking over the family business?
I don't necessarily think so.
Particularly the hand that he can deal you. It's no ordinary hand. He's the best sushi chef that's probably ever lived. Mm. So that's an opportunity that's quite unique.
I think it's both an opportunity but a curse.
Yeah.
And I think they make that pretty clear in the movie. There was one particular so he had an old apprentice. Jiro had an old apprentice who ended up leaving the restaurant himself. I think his name, Daisuke Nakazawa, and he runs an extremely successful sushi Nakazawa in Japan. And his quote is, "Only when the son makes sushi, which is twice as good as his father's, will he be as seen as an equal."
Yeah, which is...
and sometimes when the father is too successful, his son can never surpass him.
Yeah, he's dealt an impossible hand there, isn't he?
Yeah. and there's this real...
He's a lovely guy too. You get that feeling.
Yeah.
And
you're also a lovely guy in front of the camera.
Thank you. Oh, you think you might be...
Well, you don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard to find it.
Yeah, that's true. I guess I'm an optimist like that. I think that it's interesting because Jiro outside of work seems like quite a friendly, happy guy. He's just always working. So
correct.
And he's not an unpleasant person at work. He's just intense.
Yeah. I certainly got the vibe through the movie that he's a nice guy.
Mm. But a somewhat broken person though too, I think.
There was a bit of like an immaturity I felt that came through when some of the apprentices were, and sorry, now when I say apprentices, it sounds like I'm referring to, teenagers or something of that nature. These guys are 30 plus years old because they've been in the craft for over a decade, or some of the sous chefs who are, 35, 40, whatever it is. And there was this strange maturity that this is all that they knew, and this is the only way. And it just felt a little bit strange, particularly when they would deal with particular emotions, or they wouldn't want to recognize particular emotions or say things other than how great everything is and how much we look up to. And I think there was one of the apprentices, the sous chef, who when he this elation that came across him when, after being an apprentice for 10 years, he was able to make eggs, and he made over 200 of these egg sushis across 4 months or something, and every single one got totally rejected. And then it was after the next one that was finally good enough, and then he got referred to as there's a particular term that they refer to when they're at the point of being a semi-master, and he got referred to him by Jiro.
Shokunin.
It'd be good to know what that means, Lockie.
Expert sushi chef.
And is it expert or is it qualified to be above an apprentice? Don't know.
Better than dirt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit strange, because he was just overwhelmed, and I suspect it's a matter of the effort that he's put in across this particular thing. And
there's something I'm a little bit jealous of, being able to reject someone 200 times for quality.
You want to be more autocratic, Lockie?
No, I don't think so. I think it's like that takes a strength of will to be disliked, which I'm not sure I have enough of.
Or is it that there is so much respect that you can't be disliked?
Perhaps. Or you don't care or something. But there is something about holding people to high standards that is good, but you would say that probably crosses the line. But hey, they're trying to be the best.
So unlike him, right, who was kicked out of home at the ripe old age of 9 years old, when I was still working out how to tie my shoes, I felt, now whilst we say that he's very much pressured and tormented almost his sons to a degree, I think he's also...
I don't think I'd use that word.
Let's not use tormented. Let's say very much heavy pressure and expectation for particular things.
He's pushed them hard. Maybe we say something like that.
There's also a sheltering that they've had to some degree.
Yeah, he's provided them with a career that's, going to hold them in good stead.
Well, he's him getting kicked out at the age of 9 versus his eldest son still kind of being under his wing at the moment in the restaurant, and his son
he's still fathering his son like he didn't have.
Correct, and he's 65 years old or something like that.
We're not psychologists, but that is a good read, I reckon.
Yeah,
it's really interesting. I guess it's the type of specialization that, because they've gotten so good, you think's pretty robust in a culture like Japan that loves sushi.
And also loves mastery.
Yes.
And for him to be seen as such a master in a culture which has very high expectations of mastery is incredible.
Yeah. And I think it's important to go back on that point that he is very open to trying new things. You think mastery, you think kind of old, stuck in your ways sort of. He's just fanatical about what works and then keeps trying new stuff to get better, which it's a good message.
I think the important thing is that they seek a lot of feedback from their customers. They're very much in the midst of the customers the whole time. But it's so much so that the customers actually feel a lot of pressure eating at his restaurant.
Yeah.
And that was said a number of times throughout the film. So much so that they now go to the other son's restaurant, the younger son's restaurant, which is an exact mirror image of his father's, just so that they don't have the pressure, but they have just as good sushi.
Yeah. And they joke about that between them. So he's obviously not too precious. So this brings, interestingly, to a point that I want to ring up as well about. So something I spotted that I've been thinking about in other areas as well is the way that your surroundings can enhance your story or detract from it. So let's take the example of the fact that we're going on about how he's got a 10-person restaurant in this subway station and it's amazing. Sorry. Bloody people trying to call
and your
me.
phone's on airplane mode.
Yeah, how
He's
does
worked
that
out
work?
how to hack the system, mate.
Oh, God.
I think it's because you're still on the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, get rid of that.
Next you'll have a Bluetooth phone call coming through.
We'll just turn up. So he's in this subway station. It's a 10-seat restaurant. We're talking about this with awe, how it's so cool, you know. It is pretty cool that he's got this restaurant that Barack Obama came to and all this sort of stuff. And he's only got 10 seats, and we're talking about how that's so important, this sort of stuff. But we're only really talking about that because his food is so good. So you can say that exact same story to a restaurant that's terrible, right? And use those same things to explain why it's so crap. So, for example, I went to this restaurant in the subway station. He's not very successful because he doesn't have many seats, and it's in a weird spot. There's no toilet. Didn't make me feel very good. The food was kind of shitty and I left or whatever. And so you kind of take that concept to other things, and it made me think about, do we use some of these physical surroundings or stuff for a narrative depending on, but it's really just the quality that matters. So sitting on milk crates at your local cafe in Melbourne and having the best coffee of your life, it's going to enhance the experience. Sitting on a milk crate and getting the worst coffee of your life is detracting from the experience. And it's interesting how they're sort of circular and dependent. And so I kind of feel like if you get your product right, you can start to do some interesting stuff with the way you present it, perhaps, that actually enhances the narrative even when it might detract otherwise. I haven't quite figured it out, but it's something that popped up I thought I'd mention.
I think that's, yeah.
Does it make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. So the question I've got in that situation is, what if you're having the best coffee of your life in Melbourne, but you're sitting in a nice cafe? Maybe it's not the best coffee of your life is the point you're trying to make.
No, I think that I would also feel, I think if I'm having the best coffee of my life, wherever I am, I'm going to enjoy what I'm sitting in because I'm like, oh, this is they've done a great fit out, and it's really the quality of the product that is the lens that you see everything else around you by. But then you start to pin the feeling to the object. So if I sit at a milk crate at some cafe in Fitzroy and have the best coffee of my life, next time I see another cafe that has a milk crate, I'll probably be like, they probably serve good coffee too. I've linked the milk crate to the good feeling I've got from drinking that coffee. So
yeah, I think we've spoken about this too.
I think
right?
we were sitting on milk crates when we
might
talked
have been
about
sitting
this.
on milk crates, and my perspective is the opposite.
Interesting.
Because I think now, I think the milk crate thing's gone.
But I think
as a trend, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a trend, and now I think the copycats and the restaurants without the authentic, high quality product have now picked that up as an example. And this happens all the time. You look at the different color burger buns or the different ways of making a particular type of coffee with matcha tea or something like that. I don't know. They all pick on these particular things and then just bring them in-house as though that's like that's a pump up to this particular product. And you see this across all different industries, not just in...
So, yeah, you're 100% right. That you're talking about the interplay of this over time. So someone does it, becomes cool because the product's awesome, but it's pinned to this unique way of delivering it. But the product's bloody good, Then other people see that as a way of legitimizing their same thing, but it's not as good. It becomes widespread and loses its appeal. It's no longer trendy, right?
Yes. This all comes back to, and I can't recall the author's name. There's a particular book that talks about the innovators, the early movers.
Is this the creative curve? Is that it?
I think it is discussed in that book, but that's not I don't think that's the guy that's coined it.
Cool.
Right. And so the innovators are the one that come up with a particular idea or way of doing things to start what is known as a trend, typically. And then quite often there's a lot of rigor behind what they are actually doing. They're quite often the true innovators are ones that really have honed their craft, you would probably say. And then moved on to the first movers are the guys that might pick it up. And maybe the first movers are the guys that could be the ones that hone their craft. They aren't just going out and seeking these new innovations. Don't know. But then you get into the space of the early, the early movers, I think they are. So you've got the early movers after the first movers or early adopters
or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then you've got like the first mass of, which is the early version of the big mass. And I think that's these particular, say these cafes that
pick it all up.
And pick it all up. And that's when it's hit the mass market. And then after a particular point in time, it moves into the late movers, which is where you go to one of those milk crate cafes and you're like, oh, this is actually a shit cafe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or everyone goes.
But I still think the first one if they're good enough, the first one can hold on to it, like Jiro has, the 10-person restaurant. He's so good, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But I just wonder whether, I don't know what necessarily this means, but it's something around focus on your product first, obviously. You can enhance your product by using art and interesting packaging or the way you display it, for sure. But it's more frills and it can die off quickly, I suppose, is what you're saying.
Maybe. I think it's about what that thing is. So I think a milk crate is a gimmicky thing.
Yeah.
But then you go to his restaurant, you go in there, it's very orderly. I imagine everything in there is very high quality. It's very traditional. Yeah. There's a lot of authenticity that comes out. Whilst it's in a subway precinct, somewhere, that gives it, there's this kind of grungy external element around it. Then there's this kind of diamond just sitting in the center. And maybe it just means that it shines brighter because of where it is.
Yeah, it's quite unique, isn't it?
Yeah.
Rose between thorns.
But it also, I feel like this happens a lot in particularly the restaurant industry. Like, again, coming back to Chef's Table is Francis Melman. His restaurants are out in the middle of Argentina somewhere, or even in Patagonia, depending on where you want to go. And they're very isolated, hard to get to locations. And you look at there's a restaurant here in Victoria called Bray, which is it's a fair way out down southwest from Melbourne or west from Melbourne, and it's just they're in the middle of nowhere. But because of the quality of what they deliver,
they pull people in, and it becomes what would be a negative becomes a positive.
It becomes a positive. It generates an environment.
That's probably the point, is that you can turn, if your product is good enough, you can turn things that you can get kind of this critical mass of quality that turns things that are a negative into a positive. What would become a detraction becomes a selling point if you're good enough. I think maybe that's what I'm trying to say. But when I figure it out and keep thinking about it, I'll let you know.
But and it may also just be part of the authenticity of what it is.
Yeah.
And so this is our authentic roots of where we came from. This is what we are. And then this is our whole presentation to the world.
Get so good that everything becomes an enabler to you. You start to get some leverage from everything.
Yeah. But do your 60 years first.
Yeah. So what are you going to do differently now you've watched this documentary, mate?
The big one for me was just recognize how far you can take any craft, I think, is a really big one. I honestly never would have, before seeing this documentary, realized how far you could take something like sushi, and which is quite incredible.
Yeah, people it's noticeably better significantly better than what you can get elsewhere.
Yeah.
For something that's quite simple. So the best critics say.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't be able to taste it, but supposedly the best critics in the world say that this is the case.
Or even someone who ate sushi regularly would be able to tell, I would assume.
Maybe this is the same con with wine. I don't know.
Well, no, I think if you're a person who enjoys sushi, you would love eating at this restaurant.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah.
If you'd never eaten sushi before, it's hard to have a baseline to go off.
Yeah. And you can't use California rolls as
sushi.
The definition of what sushi is.
No.
And so the thing that really kind of hit that for me was looking at kind of timescales around a craft. And you look at what can be achieved across a year, which we often overestimate, and we often underestimate what can be achieved across a decade. It's a quote I'm stealing from someone.
Since you told me that, that's really resonated with me. Really resonated with me.
Yeah, I'm trying to work out where that comes from.
Bringing that quote into my life, because it is super helpful.
Yeah. But when you do look back 10 years ago and say, oh, shit, that's what I was doing.
Imagine if you'd played a guitar every day.
For that, correct. Yeah. Or if you played the guitar 5 days a week.
Or even once a week, you'd probably still be absolute master at it.
Absolutely, yeah. As long as you were like trying to, there was effort going in. I think that's important, and a bit of discipline. So, these guys make rice for 10 years. There's something that the subconscious and the conscious mind are kind of coming together to create this different landscape of what can be achieved in a particular craft. So that was impressive for me, mate. And what about you?
Yeah, I love yours. I think that's awesome. Something, since you told me that quote, I've been trying to do is when I'm meditating, imagine one day, then imagine the rest of the week, and then imagine 2 weeks, then a month, then 2 months, then 3 months, then 4 months. Then I'll jump to a year. Then I'll imagine the next year, the next year, the next year, the next year, and that's 5 years. Then I'll imagine 10 years. And it started to give me this perspective of how much time, if you're lucky enough to stay healthy, you have, and how much time in a day you have too. Yes.
This is about the habit itself. This is about doing that particular thing itself.
You don't have to solve. It gives you for some reason, it gives you two, for me, it gives me two appreciations. One for the day that I'm about to undertake, that I don't have to solve everything today or something like that. Or if I just do a little bit today, that'll be enough. But it also gives me the hope that how much time I've got to do the things hopefully I enjoy and I get value from, and also the more time to learn too, and that doing that little bit's really helpful each day.
Yeah. It's like looking at the long game, there's a patience, and then it kind of draws back to that urgency at the now. So meaning do a little bit now. Just try a little bit each of these days.
It motivates you to do that little bit, but not worry so much about whatever you're worried about either. I'm not saying I'm not worrying. I'm a very prone to stress person. I get anxious. But this helps.
I think that makes you relatively normal.
Can you do me a favour? Can you give that a go and tell me on our next episode if you got anything out of it? I'd be interested in someone else's perspective.
About anything? Or
this kind of meditation technique where you're thinking about a day, a week, next week, the week after,
And just what, are you putting yourself in that position?
Yeah, you just kind of imagine the day, and then just imagine the passing of time for a week.
Okay.
And then it's a bit like, have you ever done that one where they say, imagine yourself, imagine the street you're on, imagine the suburb you're in, imagine the country. It's a similar concept to that, but with time.
Time instead of place.
Yeah.
Okay.
The passing of time.
I'll have a go at that.
Yeah.
And worst comes to worst, mate, drawing another parallel back to a book which I think is still very similar to this documentary, as we said at the start, Range, is as long as you progress a little bit each day.
Yeah. So my two I had is I want to solidly define what I'm repeating. So is it once a week that I'm trying to reflect, or is it once a day that I'm trying to improve a little bit? What's the right amount that I'm actually going to do it? I'm not just going to say, I'm going to do that every day, or I'm going to do it once at lunch and once at night, because that's what I usually do, and want to change every single thing immediately and fail and then give up.
Because there's too many things to change.
Yeah. Like what's something I'm actually going to, what's the point where I'll actually keep doing it and build it up from there? And I think it might be once a day, but it might be once a week that I just have a think about what I've done that week. And
it's almost like, what's the minimum viable frequency?
Yeah, that I'm, because it's
to keep me.
It's no use, you know, you can't iterate nothing, can you? It's like, if you're not doing it, if you're setting yourself up to fail, you'll look back in a year and go, well, I didn't do it, did I? So once a week's better than none at all. So I've got to figure that out, and then I want to intentionally write down what are my core skills and how and where am I at with them, so I can start doing the Jiro method.
And start adding your layers on top.
Yeah, and be a bit more disciplined about my base already, what I know to be the right thing for me. I want to be more consistent on that.
The more that we've discussed this, the more that this is just relating me so much to principles.
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
And it's been fun to talk about this after we've talked about Range too.
Yes. A lot of similarities, even though on the surface it might not seem so.
Yeah. And
I think they're barking at the same topics, even though it might be taken from slightly different lenses.
I agree. And I think for me, it's kind of, this conversation's helped put those two things together. So cheers. Thank you.
Thank you. Until next time.
Till next time.